As always, we will be recording today's webinar. We will make the recording available once it is hosted on our support forums. So I would just like to take the opportunity to thank you all for attending today and taking the time out of your days to listen to me, I suppose, for a few minutes talking about Mozy and our service. So as you'd have seen in the sign up email, so today's session is going to be talking about how long your data stays on Mozy servers and looking at some recent changes we've made to our data retention policy. Okay, so just a brief introduction. My own name is Niall for those of you who haven't joined before. I am the technical trainer and learning and development person for Mozy Support Organization. So I look after various forms of internal and external training for Mozy. And I do these monthly webinars once a month, obviously. Normally the last Wednesday of each month is the one we target. And I hope if today is your first time that you enjoy the session and you will think about coming back and joining us for future sessions. So today's session is going to be broken out into a couple of areas. So we're going to look firstly at the length of period that Mozy keeps your files. So answering the question, does Mozy keep my files indefinitely? We'll then look at when Mozy actually deletes the files off of our servers. And then we'll look at the changes to our retention policy, what the changes have been that have been made, and then as well as that, how does that benefit you, the individual user? So the first questions first, does Mozy keep my files indefinitely? And the straightforward answer is no. Mozy doesn't keep your files indefinitely. It's not an archival product. So you need to be backing up your files on a regular basis or on a continuous basis to keep your files safe. So if you run a backup of a file today, if you delete it off of your computer, it will be on Mozy servers for your retention period, which in the case of Mozy Home and Mozy Pro users is slightly different. We'll discuss what those changes are in a moment, but if you were to delete it off your computer, it would stay on Mozy servers for X amount of days before being removed off of there. So you need to be running continuous backups, and that can be either daily. Some users would like to do it weekly, and other users like to run multiple backups in a day. So it does vary depending on your backup policy, but the down low of it really and the end point of it really is that you do need to be running continuous backups to keep your files safe on Mozy servers. Can it be done that Mozy would keep your files indefinitely? Technically, you could do it, but there is a big caveat to that. So the big issue there is that you could run a backup today and never run a backup again on Mozy, okay? And continue to pay for your service at that time. As long as the account is active in the sense that it's being paid for, we will keep that version of the backup indefinitely if no other backups are run. This will give you a single point in time restore of a couple of files, but it's not recommended because it's not much use to you. The fact that you're having to pay for this service on an ongoing basis just to store it in an indefinite basis, but also a lot of your files and folders change on a daily basis. Some may only change on a weekly basis, but they do change a lot and on a regular enough basis, making that point of time backup that you've made once off not very valuable to you should something go wrong. Imagine if you did a backup of those files once, let's say in June or July of 2015. Now, technically, you can go into the website, log in, and restore the files from that particular day, that single day that you stopped running your backups from in, say, July 2015, and you can restore those files. But how much would those files have changed between then and now? And would the files that from then be any use to you now? So that's the advantage and the benefit from Mozy is that if you're running it on a continuous basis, we have we have up-to-date versions of your files, and they're the versions of the files that you really want to restore. So speaking about deleting files or removing files, let's move to the second point that we're going to look at today, and that's when does Mozy delete the files? Does delete my files from the Mozy servers, or just deletes files in general from the Mozy servers? There's two questions to ask here. The first is, have you deleted your account or computer? If you've deleted your account or your computer, then Mozy will mark the files that you had backed up to the service for deletion, and they'll be removed immediately. So we don't hold on to the files. If you tell us that you've cancelled your account and your account is now cancelled, or you delete a computer off of your account, then we look at that and we will mark those files for deletion and removal. We don't hold on to those files for a couple of days before we delete them. They're marked for deletion straight away and they're removed from the servers. Okay. I suppose looking at retention and the ability to restore files, looking at the second question is the more valuable one, I suppose, for our session here today. And that is, are you running regular backups? Okay, so if you're running regular backups, then this obviously changes in the sense that marking files for deletion. If you're running regular backups and you've removed a file from your backup or you've deleted a file from your computer, then it gets marked for deletion on the Mozy servers. The difference here is that when you delete your account or your computer, it gets marked for deleted and is removed immediately. When you're running regular backups and you back up a file, then, or if you've been running a file for backup for a number of days and then you decide to either deselect that file from your backup set, so you don't want to back it up any longer. You may have done that intentionally or you may have done it accidentally, or a file gets deleted off your computer that was being backed up to Mozy before. In that scenario, it is marked on our servers for deletion, but it doesn't get deleted until it goes through your retention policy. Okay? So the data retention period, or how long Mozy retains your data before removing it from our servers, is what I'm talking about here. So previously for Mozy Home users, that was 30 days. So we would maintain that version of the file on our servers for 30 days before permanently removing it. In the case of Mozy Pro users, we would have kept that file on our servers for 60 days before removing it. Why would we do that? It gives you the chance that if you've accidentally removed it from the backup, to add it back in and the file still be there. Or if it was accidentally deleted from your machine and you need to recover that file, then it's still available on the Mozy servers for that period before removing it permanently. Again, it's to give you that extra level of peace of mind around the files and the folders that you have on your machine, and to let you know that they're protected securely. So, looking at the changes that have been made. So, the changes that have been made is all around the data retention period. As I mentioned there, Mozy Home users would have had 30 days of retention. Mozy Pro users would have had 60 days of retention. What is retention, you may be asking? As I was mentioning previously, it's that period where we hold on to a file on our servers, maintain it there for you to restore for a set period of days. So for example, if I was to run a backup today of a file, and I was a Mozy Home user on the old policy, I'd have backed up my file today, and then that file, that version of the file from today would be available to me for 30 days. So if I fast forwarded 30 days time, then I would be able to restore today's version of the file. If I was to go 31 days in advance, then today's version wouldn't be available to me because it's an older version and we would have removed it because there's newer versions available. If I deselect a file from backup, then it remains on our servers for Mozy Pro users for that 60 days, for home users that 30 days, before eventually being removed permanently. Okay, In terms of the changes to our data retention period, we're going to go into those in more detail in a moment. But the main one that you want to highlight here is the fact that Mozy Home users are going from a 30-day retention period, and we're increasing that to a 3-month retention period. So you're going from 30 days right up to 3 months of retention. So that means that you're getting a longer, you'll have your files will be available longer for you online. So as I said, in today's scenario, you deselect a file from backup today, it gets removed from our servers permanently in 30 days time. With this new change, you will maybe deselect or delete a file accidentally from your computer, and it will be available for you to restore for 3 months. So again, it gives you a bigger window to restore that data should you need it. Mozy Pro users will go from 60 days right up to 6 months. Okay, so they would have had 60 days of versioning previously and retention of that data right up to 6 months. So as you can see, it is a big change in terms of the availability of data for you as you see fit. So to better give you an understanding of how what these changes are, we're going to first look at the Mozy Home and Mozy Pro file journey and what it used to be. Okay, so these changes have only taken place in the last number of weeks, and it will only kick into place as you start upgrading the software, which is being pushed out now to users. And this is what it looks like. So on the previous file journey, the user backs up their file on a continuous basis. Okay, each day it's sent to the Mozy cloud, and on our servers that file is retained for 30 days, giving the user the ability to go back 30 days to restore a file from. So in this image here, you can see the file is being backed up to our servers. We have 30 days worth of files available to the user to restore from. Okay, so each day that the backup is taking place, we have a new version of the file. On top of that, you'll see to the right of the diagram, each specific day that each specific day that we've run a backup, we could have run potentially up to 12 backups in that day. If we do that, then that means we have 12 versions of each file each day. Okay, so you may have noticed this before. If you were doing an in-client restore, you can select the time that you want to restore the file from and the specific date. So in this scenario, because we're looking after so many different versions in the 30-day window, the maximum retention period we could give to users was that 30 days. Because the amount of space that this takes up on our back end is considerably larger than what you would see as your tally for backed up. So when you look at your status window, the Mozy client, and it tells you that you've backed up 20 gigabytes, a general rule of thumb would be that we would have 3 to 4 times that amount of data space or storage space being used on the back end because of these different versions of the file that we keep. So I'll give you an example. If a file was to change every day and a user was to run 12 backups per day during a 30-day window like a Mozy Home user has here, that would give us 360 different versions of that particular file. So those versions are basically just the different changes. So when Mozy runs a backup originally, it just backs up a full version of that file. Subsequent backups just back up the changes, and these changes are what make up these different versions. Okay, so it can take up quite a large amount of space on our backend, and that's why we can only offer a 30-day retention window. For Mozy Pro users, it's very much the same. The only difference is that we give 60 days of versioning to Mozy Pro users. But still, it's the same issue. We have multiple different versions potentially of a file, and that is all being stored on our servers. And the size of the user's storage that's being used is much bigger than actually what they've maybe potentially running their backup for, as I mentioned previously. So what we've done is we've decided to move our retention policy slightly and change it slightly. So going from a Mozy Home user who used to have 30 days only of file versioning, looking at statistics from restores, basically what we've determined is that most users are only looking for specific versions of a file in the couple of days after they've run a backup. So if for example I run into an issue today, I'm normally only looking for specific versions of a file for kind of maybe 10 days back. After that, users are not really particularly bothered which version it is as it goes further back. So what we've done here is we've looked at those statistics and we've implemented a new what we term version consolidation of the different versions of a file that you would have backed up with us. So in the new file journey, when you back up a file, okay, for a Mozy Home user, on day one that file gets backed up, from day one to day 3, you have the ability to restore hourly versions of that file. Okay, so if you run a backup, potentially if you ran an hourly backup for every hour for 3 days, you could potentially have 72 versions of that file available for you to restore within that first 3 days of that file being backed up. After that, from day 4 right up to day 31, what we do is we create a daily version of the file. So rather than having 12 versions on each day, we create a daily version of that file and make it available to the user for the first 31 days. As this process is going on, every Sunday, a weekly version of the file is made, and that weekly version is made up of those daily backups. And then that weekly version of the file is available for the 92 days or the 3 months. So similar to what you have existing as a Mozy Home user, you have the 30 days of daily versions available to you. We're now adding on to that the weekly backups going out for the additional 92 days. So what you'll have, if you were to back up a file today, fast forward 30 days time, you would have the ability to restore that file on a daily basis, going back the 30 days. After that, then, what you would be able to do is restore a weekly version of that file. So rather than a specific day, you would get a weekly version of the file. Okay, so it pares down the amount of versions of the file that's available to you, but it's giving you a version of the file for longer. Okay, so where you would have only had previously the 30 days, you've now got the additional 60 plus days available to you in weekly backups. So that's generally about 8 additional versions of that file that you will be able to restore. For Mozy Pro users, we're moving to 6 months availability of data. The differencing here, it's very much the same up to the weekly scenario. So every Sunday, the weekly version is made and the weekly version is available for 92 days. In addition to that, we will create a monthly version on the first Sunday of each month for the user. And we will create a monthly version each month, and that monthly version then is available for an additional is available then for the 184 days in total. So if you wanted to, at any point, you could go back and you could restore a weekly version in the first 92 days. In the first 30 days, you could restore a daily version of that file. In the first 3 days, you could restore hourly versions of that file. But after the 92-day period, so between 92 days and the 184 days, you would just have a monthly version of that file available. Okay, so a singular monthly version of the file. So the latest version of that file on the first Sunday of each month would be your monthly version. Again, it's going from having 60 days of just daily versions available for you right out now to having 6 months of files available for you to restore. Albeit it is a monthly version, so you're getting a monthly version, and it's not every single day, but you're still getting additional versions that you wouldn't have had previously. So that's the kind of technical side of things, and I suppose the probably the stuff that is not too exciting for most people, but it is of benefit to you. How does that benefit to you? Obviously, the biggest one there is the fact that it's increased retention. By using this new retention policy that we're implementing, we're able to provide a greater window of retention for restores, since there's less individual versions being retained on the data centers. Okay, so because there's less individual versions, we can push out that retention period and give you longer term access to the individual files and folders. The second one is that it'll increase backup performance. Using this retention policy will allow us to have significantly smaller database requirements to store the information about backups. And obviously then a smaller backup and a smaller database allows for faster backup processing. So from our testing of this, we've seen that it increases the backup performance for users, particularly on our back end, in terms of the both backing up the files, because we're doing it in a particular way with less versioning, so that can increase our backend performance to give you a faster backup, and in a more effective way. And finally, the other main benefit of this is increased restore speed. Again, because we're having less versions or patches, means that we need less to create a restore for a heavily patched file. So I gave you the example a while ago of the file that changes every day for 30 days. You run 12 backups a day, and that file changes, and each backup for 30 days. So now you have 360 versions of that file. So what you have is the original backup file, and then you have 300, and what we call patches. You have 360 patches that add on to that file to give you what that file is on the 31st day. So if you were backing up that file for the last 30 days, then that version of the file that you have today is made up of all those changes and the original file. So it's made up of all those changes. So what happens then on our back end is that we have to go, and to give you today's version of that file that you've been backing up for the past 30 days, on the back end, it would have to go out and pull all those changes together, pull the original file, put them all together to give you today's version. So now, not to say that takes massively long time periods for certain files, but this change alone will increase that change speed, because rather than having to go and get the 12 backups for each day and put them back together, we're just going to have one daily backup version, so that when we're looking back to 30 days, we only have to grab 30 versions of the file, put them together and make it available. And that, as opposed to having to get 360 together to restore that file to you. So as you can see there, it's definitely going to increase the restore speed for you, the end user. So that's all I'm going to present on. I'm going to leave the time open now to any questions that you may have around what we've talked about and what we've looked at. If you are unsure of anything we've discussed, if you want me to go back over something and explain it again, then please use the question box that you have there available to you on the tab to submit your questions. And if you don't have any questions, thank you very much for taking the time to join us here today, and we hope to see you next month. So if you do have any questions, just pop them into the chat window below or the questions box, and I will get to those. Hi, Mary. So Mary's question is that she has Mozy Home and she's looking for the cost of Mozy Pro. So there is a slight price difference between Mozy Home and Mozy Pro. It depends. The Mozy Pro pricing model is different to the Mozy Home one. It goes more so on purchasing storage as opposed to, with Mozy you have a 50 gigabyte bundle and a 125 gigabyte bundle. There is slightly different pricing on the Mozy Pro one. You can find on the Mozy website, there is a tool there for calculating out how much it would cost you depending on how much storage or how much data you want to back up. So it's slightly different depending on the amount of data that you're backing up. It may work. It may be a benefit to you, but that is dependent on yourself. If you give me a moment, I could probably find roughly. So say it is slightly different pricing. So Mary, I just sent you a link there with that will take you directly to the pricing for the Mozy product. So let me know if there's any issue with opening that. Okay, so we've just another question there. Hi, Roland. So your question is this effective now for Mozy Pro, or when was this in effect? So it is in effect. It's being rolled out on across our back end over the last month or so, and it is available if you're upgrading. If you've updated to the latest version of the Mozy software, and then it should be available to you. I'll just tell you now if you bear with me. So that would be the 232 client. So the latest version of the 232 client. If you have updated to that, then it should be. So if you're on the 232 version of the client, then these changes will be implemented on your Mozy Pro account, Roland. I hope that answers your question. So are there any other questions? Please feel free just to pop them into the question box, or you can get me on the chat window as well if that's easier for you. And I'll try and answer as many as I can for you. And again, for anybody who has joined us that doesn't have any questions, again, just thank you for taking the time for joining us today. It is much appreciated. I know it's taking time out of your day to join us here, so I really do appreciate it.